What's up, it's your boy Rawk, and I'm so excited! You see, I have an appointment with my doctor tomorrow, and man, he's such a nice guy. Best doctor in the country. And I haven't seen him in like 4 years, so there'll be a lot to catch him up on. I wonder if he knows that Persona Q2 came out on the 3DS in 2019. He diagnosed me with death. This blows! Now I know what the Wii U went through a few minutes after it released, and the worst part is, my death isn't even being accompanied by a 720p Breath of the Wild, and that is just disrespectful. Video game consoles are like most people. They'll fucking die eventually. You may think the Atari Jaguar and I are immortal, but our time is coming, don't you worry. Whether you like it or not, every games console has to bite the dust at some point, and eventually, companies will stop releasing games for them. For some consoles, that can be a few years after their predecessor comes out, and for others, it can be 3 days after they're announced. With the last game on a console, you would think the companies would want to end things off with a bang. One big final send-off for the ages. Something that is the culmination of a console's legacy. There's that, and then there's having Frogger for the Sega Mega Drive as your dying words. Most of the time, companies don't necessarily plan when they're going to stop support for a system. And even when they do finally make that decision, that won't stop the third parties. In most cases, third party and indie studios will continue to pump out titles for consoles for years after the big companies stop. They get comfortable with the hardware and how to make the most out of it. So when a new generation of hardware comes around, not every developer wants to take the plunge. Guess what they do? Yes, a lot of the time consoles are kept alive by games coming out for them after they were discontinued, even when the company who made the console has stopped publishing games for the platform entirely. And nowhere is this more prevalent than the Wii. They have these things in purgatory now? Near the end of the Wii's life, Nintendo definitely slowed their roll quite a bit when it came to publishing titles. The last major game they published was Mario Party 9, and I will debate anybody that considers that thing major or a game. This was in March 2012, and there weren't any more titles after that. Technically. See, here in the UK, us Wii owners have been living contently with motion-controlled Pikmin 2 since 2009. But over in the States, they didn't get this version of the game until June 2012. Jesus Christ. That was the last Nintendo-published game on the system. It came out a few months before the console's successor. What about the third parties? They really kept their promise. I respect it. I don't understand it, but I respect it. Retro City Rampage DX Plus and Shakedown Hawaii both released for the Wii on July 9th, 2020. And I swear to God, they only released these games on the Wii so they could say they were the last games released on the Wii? I mean, technically speaking, Wii games could still release after these games, but in response to that, I'm gonna yell my favorite letter of the alphabet. Why? I mean, sure, the Wii was the best-selling console of its generation and one of the best-selling consoles of all time, but by 2020? Who gave a shit? Now, if we want to talk about a console on the complete opposite end of the success scale, the Wii U! Before the Switch came out, Nintendo publicly stated that they would be discontinuing the Wii U after the release of Breath of the Wild. And sure enough, this was the last game they published on the system, but we already know that because it didn't release on me and I'm still bitter about it. Seeing as the Wii U just barely managed to outsell Rwanda, I can't imagine many games would have been releasing for it after Breath of the Wild. I knew getting 2 of these was a worthwhile investment. Just think about this for a second. There was a Wii U game released the day before Skyward Sword HD. What sort of alternate universe shit is this? Ubisoft is usually a pretty consistent post-mortem supporter for most consoles. By that I mean they release Just Dance games on them for another decade. Just Dance 2019 came to the Wii U in 2018, and Just Dance 2020 came out on the Wii in 2019. But not the Wii U. Ubisoft, explain yourself. In most cases, Japan usually has the final say on any given console. For pretty much all of them, their last game was exclusive to Japan. But let it be known that Super Food Frenzy only released in Europe. Japan and the States didn't get it. Finally, something's going our way! He finally has a cousin! On the NES, the last game we got was Wario's Woods, but Japan got F-22 in November 1997. They got a Famicom game the same month as they got Diddy Kong Racing. Yet in the rest of the world, we still haven't even gotten F1 through 21. I'll keep waiting, Nintendo. On the Super Nintendo, the last game was Frogger, and man, who doesn't want to die with Frogger? Over in Japan, they got Fire Emblem Thracia 776. 3 months before they got Majora's Mask. Who the hell still wanted Super Famicom games at this point? Technically speaking, the final SNES game actually released in 2017, being Star Fox 2 on the SNES Classic, Mini, whatever the f*** you want to call it. To be fair though, this game was never officially released on a cartridge, so you could make an argument that, no, this doesn't count. But I don't care, the fact that we got a new Super Nintendo Nintendo game 26 years after the hardware debuted is amazing to me. The last Game Boy game was Pokemon Yellow. Yeah, yellow. Outside of Japan, Pokemon Red and Blue released at what was supposed to be the end of the Game Boy's life, but those games were so successful that they allowed the Brick of 89 to receive games for 1 more year. Thank the Lord for Pokemon. The third version of Gen 1 came out right before the Game Boy Color was set to release, but it surprised me that this was the last game for the original Game Boy. I mean, I get it, it would make absolutely no fucking sense to release Game Boy games after the Color released, since, you know, the Color was backwards compatible with it. It could play both Game Boy and Color games, so why not just make Game Boy Color games at that point? But something not making sense is Nintendo's favorite kind of thing. Why else did you think 2015 happened? Nintendo, why would you release Mario Tennis Ultra Smash in the barren, incomplete state that it's in? Because it'll make the backlash that much funnier. Japan was living a completely different life though. The last Game Boy games released over there came out on March 30th, 2001. Holy shit! That's 9 days after the GBA released over there. Okay, well, these games must have been revolutionary to release that late on in the Game Boy's life. They sure were. Now, over on the Game Boy Color, the last game we got was Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets on November 15th, 2002. I couldn't imagine the afterlife without it, but Japan got that on July 18th, 2003. Because who didn't want to play that game on their Game Boy Color before the release of the DS? I know, I seem really hung up on the release of subsequent hardware, but it just baffles me that games release so close to consoles that are 2 generations ahead. You know what I could go for now that I have a GameCube? A new Virtual Boy game. Damn. Guys, I have bad news. I know this might be shocking, but the Virtual Boy was a huge failure. Holy shit. The world truly wasn't ready to hear that. The Virtual Boy flopped massively. It didn't really get any games after its launch lineup, and trust me, I'd love to own one, but the UK government looked at this thing and said, no. The Virtual Boy never released in my neck of the woods. We as a society do not accept the color red. We have our reasons. So I guess, technically speaking, we have still yet to receive our last Virtual Boy game over here. We're still yet to receive our first Virtual Boy game, but hey, we're still yet to receive our last. Isn't it fun to be stupid? Over in the States, 3D Tetris was the final Virtual Boy game, because this shit was just doing nothing for humanity. It's every man's dream! This game came out less than a year after the Virtual Boy itself did, releasing in March of 96 when the console released in July of 95. But over in Japan, this damn thing didn't even manage to get any games in 96. And the last games released over there were SD, Gundam Dimension War, and Virtual Bowling. I woke up a few days before my first birthday, saw these games on my nightstand, and then I got shot. The Virtual Boy couldn't even make it to the launch of the Nintendo 64, so f it, let's talk about that system instead. What else would you do if you weren't allowed to have a Virtual Boy? This system had a lot more late life support than I remember. Banjo-Tooie, Mario Party 3, Conker's Bad Fur Day. Like, you started giving a shit when the system's replacement was knocking on your door. But when all was said and done, the last game was Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3, which still released embarrassingly close to the GameCube's launch. Come on, Nintendo. People just weren't ready for the best console of all time right away. Or ever. You gotta give those who aren't ready for the truth something to wet their whistle. Speaking of the best console of all time, in North America, the final GameCube game released was a Wozniak's Wet Dream, but that game never actually released on the GameCube in PAL territories. Wah wah. We may not have had Madden 08 on the GameCube, but we did still manage to end things on a high note with Ratatouille on August 3rd, 2007. Oh lord, oh Christ, if Ratatouille for the GameCube isn't at my funeral, I'm gonna be one fucking pissed ghost. I'll haunt Nintendo UK, they'll repent eventually. The Game Boy Advance's last game was Samurai Deeper Kyo, which came in a DVD bundle on February 12th, 2008. It's not surprising to me that the GBA died with a movie tie-in game. What is surprising to me is that it wasn't Happily Never After, because people loved putting shitty games based on shitty kids films on the GBA. Everybody has their niche. The 3DS died peacefully with Persona Q2, but everybody knows that at this point. That's right, everybody. Ask the suffragettes. They know all about this kind of stuff. But what was the original DS's last game? This is the best-selling Nintendo system of all time. It must have went out with a bang. And what better bang is there to go out with than the Winx Club saving Alfia on November 11th, 2014. Oh, thank f***. I really needed to hear that today. A console's final game is never the most impactful thing in a system's life, but they're incredibly interesting to look at, especially because now I know I'll never be alone in purgatory. I can always track down a deceased copy of Shakedown Hawaii or 3D Tetris. but I do have standards. If I were to try and bring Wario's Woods down here, then I'd be on my way to super hell.